that'll kind of come into play with some of the immigration detainees that are in Lindsay. And so in making this, it's kind of important, and in doing migrant justice work, to see how complicated this stuff really is. And the Canadian government has really done a good job in making so many different classifications for individuals coming into Canada, and has created such a hierarchy that it is really hard to do this work. Because just in listening to Michael, your name's Michael? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Just in listening to Michael, every case is context specific. Even if you're coming as a refugee, are you privately sponsored? Are you publicly sponsored? Are you coming from a designated country of origin or not a designated country of origin? It gets really complicated, and through almost every single one of those categories, you can be made illegal. So I can go into that later if you guys want. I'm going to focus on these folks in Lindsay, but before all that, I do primarily migrant justice work, so people who are coming as temporary foreign workers. I've been doing this work for maybe 4 years, and plan on doing this work for the next little while. Like you were saying, we organize health clinics and health fairs, just because on the whole health-based side, these individuals get screwed over really hard also, and I could spend days talking just about health, but today we're going to be talking about prison. Basically, through this work, I've partnered up, our organization has partnered up with tons of organizations, with UFCW, with different health clinics, with No One Is Illegal, with Justicia. So we've made a lot of friends in this work, because you can't do it all. It's better to just focus on one aspect and just focus on that, because if not, it becomes too big. Unfortunately, First Person actually does focus on all of them, and that's why we don't have very good capacity for things. But anyway, so we teamed up with No One Is Illegal for a lot of events in the past. And basically, in terms of what's going on in Lindsay, Ontario right now, we were co-organizing an event called Running Down the Walls. Has anybody heard of Running Down the Walls? Yeah. Basically, it's in its history is an anarchist event. And so every year, different anarchist chapters and different cities will raise money for political prisoners. They say political, but lately it's starting to shift away from political and just raising money for long-term prisoners. So there were some people from First Person who were organizing for this event in Hamilton, and we received a call that people were starting to strike in this detention center in Lindsay. So kind of what happened, and I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a timeline, is that, so in Lindsay, there have always been immigration detainees in Lindsay, but there have never been this many. So as you might have touched on, they're scattered all over. Basically, you're only held in a detention, an actual immigration holding center, for maybe a few weeks, and then you're switched to a provincial jail. And in many cases, you're held in maximum security prisons. And so a lot of these folks were actually being held in Maplehurst, which is in Milton. They were being held in the Dawn, and they were being held in the Toronto West. So a bunch of different facilities. And then basically what happened is that on August 20th, and some people weren't even in jail, actually. Some people were outside of jail. And on August 20th, they took a bunch of people without notice, didn't tell them that they were going to move them, and they're like, okay, we're taking you guys over to Lindsay. Some people who were permanent residents, who had been convicted of prior crimes as a permanent resident, went into, so basically how it works is that when you're a permanent resident, if you've been convicted of a crime, in some cases, depending on the severity of that crime, they'll order what's called a removal order. Once you're given that removal order, so essentially to be removed, or deportation notice, you have to sign in with CBSA. And sometimes they're making you sign in every day. So I've spoken to a lot of people who have lived in Canada for several years, some people up to a decade, as permanent residents, were convicted of some sort of crime, served their crime, so already spent time in jail, and then were signing in with CBSA. And one day they went to go sign in, and CBSA said, well, you failed to comply. Basically what it means to fail to comply is that you missed a meeting at some point or another. All of these individuals swear that they didn't miss a meeting. So that's one half of the people who were in Lindsay. The rest of them were in detention already. Some of them were in detention because they were designated foreign nationals. So basically what it means when you're a designated foreign national is that the government of Canada calls these people, they get put in that category if they've come as an irregular arrival. And basically that means that they don't have papers and that the government believes that they were smuggled. And so this gets really weird because that whole word smuggling is so broad. Like the majority of folks that I know, I'm from El Salvador. So the majority of folks that I know who are coming from El Salvador, they're using coyotes. That's what you use, right? And so when you can't get papers, it's really difficult to get papers in El Salvador on that end. When you can't get papers, that's what you're going to use. But if you arrive to Canada, you're now deemed as a designated foreign national, and they automatically detain you for 2 weeks. If they can't identify you within that 2 weeks, they will detain you for 6 months. And then after that 6 months, they might detain you for 6 more months. That's the other category of individuals. And then there's the individuals who came as refugee claimants and were failed. They call them failed claimants. And basically that means they either just didn't get their appeal in on time, or the government of Canada decided that they weren't going to be granted refugee status and they didn't leave. There's all kinds of reasons. So these individuals were either taken from prisons in Ontario, or they went to sign in and then they were arrested on the spot. The individual who actually was going to come in today, really awesome lady named Latoya, her husband, she went with her husband to sign in. He got asked to be brought into a room, and she was just sitting outside the room. She just thought that they needed to have a private conversation. They literally arrested him right there and then took him away. She actually burst into the room. She's like, "What are you doing?" to my husband. And they were like, he failed to comply, so we're arresting him. And throughout all this and throughout all of Michael's cases, it gets so murky as to the reasons. And it is really easy under this system to become illegal. Even with the recent laws and changes in Bill C-31, before, when you were a permanent resident, that's the highest of the hierarchy is citizenship. If you got citizenship, if you get convicted of a crime, you're going to serve your crime, and the prison industrial complex is so complicated and really messed up also. But that's how they deal with you, and then you get it. Now, if you're a permanent resident, if you leave the country, say someone is ill in your home country, or you have to go to a wedding, or for whatever reason, if the government wants to, they have the power to take away your permanent residency. If the country that you're coming from all of a sudden is like, "Hey, we're a democracy now and everything's great here," the government of Canada can send you back. So the permanent residency status is losing a lot of its status, pretty much, in the hierarchy. So that's something to consider when you think of what's going on in these changes. And these are supposedly the people who have the most rights in the hierarchy of immigrants. So anyways, I'm going to side rant a lot. Is that okay? Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. That's kind of how I operate. So I try to be organized, but then it never comes out that way. So anyways, I'm going to give you all a timeline of what happened in Lindsay. So they all got moved to Lindsay, and they're like, "This sucks." Like, at least when we were in Toronto, we were close to our lawyers. We were close. Most of them are from Toronto. We were close to our families. People who are really sick. There are some people who have lung cancer that I've spoken to. Some people have cysts in their head. They were close to hospitals. Now they're way out in Lindsay, Ontario, which is right by Peterborough. It's not close to very much, right? They can't talk to their lawyers all the time. Their families have to drive now 2.5 hours to go visit them. And because they're now in a maximum security prison, they don't get the same programming. So like you were talking about, there's no programming for them. Before, some people were working prison job, which also actually just got a wage cut. So people are protesting there. But they don't have those opportunities to work. There's no programming from them. The once library is now a cart. A lot of things have changed. And then the guards in that facility went on strike also. So like the conditions are crap. The guards went on strike. So now we have even less things. Let's go on strike. Like, this really sucks. So when they first went on strike, it was on September 17th, which was a Tuesday. I know on the video it says September 16th, but from my knowledge, from when I had started talking to immigration detainees, it was September 17th, and they went on strike for conditions. The conditions were that they weren't getting any programming, they weren't getting adequate food, they were actually getting different food from the rest of the inmate population. Their food was rotting, they weren't getting meat, ever. They had no social worker, they still don't have a social worker, by the way, and they weren't able to make any calls. So their calls kept dropping. Even I'm answer the trap line, so basically people can call me from prison, and I take their collect calls. And their calls just drop all the time. I'll pick up the phone, they say hey, and the call will drop. And they couldn't make international calls. So these are folks, some of them are recent immigrants, right? Their families live in different countries, and they can't even call them to tell them that they're in jail. It's not a good situation. So they went on strike for that. And then some of them started talking. So the first strike was they refused to go back into their cells. When the guard said it was time to go back in their cells, they did that for one day. And there was 191 of them. I'd also like to note that this is the largest strike in the history of Canada of undocumented people inside immigration detention. This has never happened before. And the reason why it happened was because the government took all three of these groups of people who were in three different detention centers, or they're not detention centers, they're jails, and placed them all into one facility. So all of a sudden you have 6 ranges of individuals who are all there under immigration detention, and they're all looking at each other being like, oh man, we're all in the same situation. We should work together and try to get something out of this, try to get some attention. So the big thing to remember, biggest strike of undocumented people in the history of Canada, documented inside of a provincial jail. So they refused to go in their cells. Then they decided, so the guards didn't respond. So like, you know what? They had heard of John and Tarek Lubani, who at that time were in Egypt. Like, these guys are going in jail and they're going on hunger strike and they're getting a lot of attention. We're in Canada, why don't we go on hunger strike and we'll see how much attention we get. So they did a 1-day hunger strike. They didn't get any attention. That was when we were contacted. Someone contacted us and we're like, hey, there's 191 people who are on hunger strike inside of Canada, 2 hours away. You don't have to look like, it's not happening all the way in Egypt. Don't get me wrong, that's really important and I'm so happy that they're out. But they're like, there's 191 of them right here on hunger strike. And so we set up a trap line and we started started talking to them. And then they stopped. They got freaked out and they're like, no, we did this 1-day hunger strike. That's it. And they actually, through that hunger strike, they got a better canteen. That was one of the things they were asking for. So they had a small success. And then they started talking and they're like, it's not just the conditions that suck. We shouldn't even be in immigration detention in the first place. What are we doing here? We are in indefinite detention. So basically what indefinite detention, just to clarify, because some folks think that it means forever. It doesn't mean forever. It means that you have no idea when you're going to get out. So basically, if you're serving a regular crime, when you get sentenced, people are like, all right, you're serving 3 years. You're serving 5 years. You're serving whatever years. When people are held in immigration detention, it's not a criminal offense. It falls under administrative law. And I'm not a lawyer or anything fancy to do with law, so I can't go into what that means, unfortunately. But basically, you're not being held for crime when you're in immigration detention. But they are not even telling you how long you're going to be held for. So you are, in essence, being held indefinitely. You have no idea when you're going to get out. Some of these people, such as Michael Mbogo, who actually just today filed a complaint with the United Nations High Commission for Refugees because he's been held for 7 years in indefinite immigration detention. No idea when he's going to get out. No idea if they're going to send him back to Iraq, or sorry, he's from Cameroon. If they're going to send him back from Cameroon, or if they're going to let him out in Canada. He's just sitting in limbo for 7 years. It's a long time. Some of these people have only been in since the point they got arrested, so it really ranges. I think the